What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, April 17th, 2017, and we have got so much to talk about today. What a crazy, insane world we are currently living in. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Ken is in our control room today, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. So let's start off with all the wars that are going on, and I'm not going to take them in any particular order because they're all very, very serious situations here. Now, apparently over in Syria, the government forces have already taken back all of the gains made by the U.S.-backed rebels following Donald Trump's cruise missile attack on that Syrian airfield. So $90 million worth of cruise missiles, and everything is back to status quo ante again, except, of course, for all those missiles that missed and hit nearby villages, killing civilians and children. Now, apparently there's been a horrible incident. The Western-backed moderate rebels apparently attacked a community of Ma'ulula, which was an Aramaic Christian community, and apparently just killed pretty much everybody there. And it's a reminder that, you know, there are a lot of Christians being killed in these war zones. And these war zones were all created by the United States of America. Now, interestingly enough, in comments on ABC's This Week, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster basically said he doubted the U.S. would send more troops to Syria. This, of course, in direct contradiction to the comment we had from the White House end of last week that the U.S. could send 50,000 troops into Syria, even though they don't really have a legitimate reason to be there. And so now we're seeing a report coming out of Pravda where U.S.-led coalition forces conducted a landing operation in Syria's Deir ez-Zor. Now, the official story is they went in there to get rid of some of ISIS supplies. For all we know, they went in there to resupply them, because we know ISIS is working for the United States of America. Now, Pompeo's out there insisting that Russia's lying, Putin is lying, everybody's lying, nobody has any credibility, and yet is still insisting that they cannot show any proof that Assad gassed his own people because it will reveal sources and methods. It must be classified. You just take our word for it. No, we're not going to take your word for it. We've been lied to too many times. And this last story never made any sense at all. Assad was on the verge of winning against the U.S.-backed rebels. There were peace talks underway that would have secured his continuing position as president of Syria. And even the White House had said, we have to accept that reality. So why would Assad carry out a chemical weapon attack on civilians, on a militarily insignificant target, doing the one thing that would allow the U.S. to go on in and strike Syria on behalf of the rebels, ISIS and Al-Qaeda? The story never made sense. Where was Assad's motive? We seem to be dealing with a government that is absolutely insisting that, you know, if you're actually using your brain, if you're asking questions, if you're being logical and rational and analytical, that you are being unpatriotic. If you think, you must be a Russian stooge. Now, Russia is saying, their indications are it was a false flag. Pompeo is saying, well, of course Russia's lying. Russia lies about everything. Russia lied to us all about Iraq's nuclear weapons. No, actually they didn't. That was the U.S. Moscow is pushing for an independent investigation from the OPCW and the United Nations to see what actually happened. This is from Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov. Meanwhile, both Russia and Iran have issued a demand for the United States to leave Syria following this obvious false flag attack in Idlib, followed by this ridiculous cruise missile attack on the Syrian airfield. And they're saying the U.S. is committing acts of war. They're committing war crimes. They're killing civilians in this harebrained, almost 6-year-long effort to get Assad out. And they're saying it's time for the United States to leave because they certainly don't have a UN resolution backing it up. There's been no congressional declaration of war against Syria. The government of Syria doesn't want them there. It's time for it to come to an end. Now then, over at the Washington Post, they've got a writer, Ed Rogers, and he's out there writing like crazy, saying this, the cruise missile attack was good, we should do more of them, and we, just haul off and absolutely make sure none of the Syrian military bases are ever going to work again. The part the Washington Post is leaving out is that this writer, Ed Rogers, is also a lobbyist for Raytheon, the company that makes the Tomahawk cruise missiles. So it's all pushing, for more money for Raytheon, more money for the war machine. And the corporate media is absolutely on board with all of this. Down in Iraq, Iraq is accusing Daesh, or whatever they're calling themselves this week, ISIS, ISIL, who the heck knows. They're accusing them of chemical weapons attacks on the Mosul troops. So we know these terrorist groups have these chemical weapons. There is no question they have these weapons. Now, getting on over to North Korea, things are getting very, very tense over there. And we're seeing these chest-thumping silverback gorilla articles out here, like this one, U.S. officials, North Korea tensions coming to a head. Mike Pence is out there saying the era of strategic patience is over. And they're talking, we've got to do something about it. We've got to do something about it. And we're seeing this article over in the Times of Israel saying, U.S. said preparing strike to utterly destroy North Korean nuclear program. Now, do you realize how dangerous that is? Because the U.S. is betting they know where all the nukes and missiles are. But I have no doubt by this point in time, North Korea is dispersing them all to new locations, spreading them out. We don't know where they all are. And an attack could trigger a retaliation. Story coming out of Huffington Post, striking North Korea could harm our key U.S. ally, China. China does not want to see a war on their border, but potentially nuclear one. So they're out there saying that this is a bad idea all around. Even Theresa May is saying, don't get all hot and bothered about North Korea. Meanwhile, Mike Pence has moved the goalposts. Last week they were saying if North Korea tests a nuclear weapon, we will attack. And North Korea did not carry out a test of a nuclear weapon. In point of fact, they may or may not have carried out a test of a missile. That story's kind of blurry. Some people are saying there was a test that failed miserably. Other sources are saying, no, it didn't happen. So somebody somewhere is lying. But Pence is now saying testing missiles is now unacceptable. If North Korea tests a missile, we're going to go in and attack. How dare they prepare to defend themselves against our most blessed invasion? Now, Vladimir Putin has moved defensive missiles to the North Korean border out of concern that Vladivostok is very, very close to that border and within range of North Korea's missiles. And if North Korea is attacked, probably what's going to happen is they're just going to fling weapons in all directions because they know they're going to lose anyway. So everybody's getting primed for this thing. Now, apparently there were some Russian bombers that were flying in international airspace, but they were close to Japanese airspace, and Japanese fighter jets were scrambled up there to warn them away. Even though they were technically in international airspace, the Japanese planes went up there and warned them off. Got all these weapons from all these different countries making stink face at each other. This thing could easily spin out of control. And apparently China and Russia have now sent their warships to sort of pace and keep watch on the United States aircraft carrier, the Carl Vinson, and its battle group, which is moving toward North Korea. And adding fuel to the fire, the United States has now directed 2 additional aircraft carriers, the USS Ronald Reagan and the USS Nimitz, to join the flotilla, to join Trump's armada. So you have 3 aircraft carriers, their fleet auxiliaries, the Chinese and Russian ships keeping an eye on these U.S. forces. All it's going to take is one hothead to trigger the biggest naval battle since the Jutland. It's spinning completely out of control. They're not going to be able to keep this on script. If they think they're going to be able to follow a pre-planned script and have it all work out, it's not going to happen. It is simply not going to happen. Here in Hawaii, the state government is getting ready to update their contingency plans if there's an attack from North Korea. And it is not entirely far-fetched. North Korea's longest-range missiles can reach only 2 points in the United States of America. And that is the Aleutian Islands and right here in Hawaii. And I don't think Kim Jong-un has an issue with the polar bears. So that leaves Hawaii, because all of the communications for the entire Pacific Fleet go through this rock. You got the Pearl Harbor command centers, you got the command centers over in Diamond Head, you got antennas all over this rock. And it makes a very, very tempting target. Now, yes, the U.S. forces can still be controlled from the Takamo and NECAP aircraft, but they don't have the capacity to run a tactical non-nuclear war. In fact, Takamo and NECAP are designed primarily around a nuclear strike. But they're getting nervous here in Hawaii. I was just talking to our mail carrier, and she's scared. People are really waking up to just how dangerous this situation has become. Now, there's a story here that came out of Post News D2, and it is going along with the story that there was a missile test on Sunday that was botched, but it was disrupted by a U.S. program of cyber and electronic warfare designed to sabotage launches. And we know the U.S. has this capability because they've used it before on other countries. And that may be the reason North Korea is doing so many tests, because the U.S. is tampering with them, tinkering with them. Now, down in Turkey, they had their referendum yesterday to give Erdogan godlike powers, and the referendum passed by a single %, and immediately there were allegations of voter fraud. Basically, the parliamentary democracy has been dissolved. Erdogan is now a dictator of Turkey, and he can stay in office until 2029. And people were having their little cell phones, and they were catching voter irregularities, voting outside of stations, voters submitting multiple ballots. One video shows a voter inserting 5 envelopes into a ballot box. Now, the Turkish opposition party is demanding a recount because of how close this election was. And more than that, there's concern raised over the fact that some of the ballots did not bear the stamp that they're supposed to have to be a legitimate ballot. See, one of the ways that Turkey is trying to combat election fraud is an official ballot, after you vote, it gets a stamp. And apparently there was a huge amount of these unstamped ballots, which basically pushed Erdogan over the top. And so the opposition is calling for the results to be annulled over the fact that bogus ballots were counted. And Erdogan's response is now to send his thugs out beating up the opposition. Protesters are being beaten up, and he's already out there saying he's going to bring back the death penalty. You don't do what he tells you, you're going to die. Erdogan is starting to look like that character out of the predictions of Nostradamus, who sets fire to the world from the Middle East. And I'm not a big fan of Nostradamus. I don't believe in that kind of stuff, but it is kind of eerie how it's all lining up. Now, the EU reporter for Turkey is warning that Turkish talks about joining the EU are going to be suspended because Erdogan got his unchecked powers. He's not a democracy, and one of the requirements that you're supposed to have to join the EU is at least nominally be a democratic system. But once again, we're seeing that all of these elections, all over the world, they're being rigged. They're being stolen. It's theater. It's like Stalin said, it is enough that people know there was an election. The people who vote decide nothing. The people who count the vote decide everything, and that's exactly what's going on now. Adding more fuel to the fire. Apparently, Chuck Schumer is now under investigation for possible connections to last year's failed coup against Erdogan in Turkey. And the investigation includes former CIA Director John Brennan and former CIA Deputy Director David Cohen. So that may get dragged into the light. And if the U.S. was behind that failed coup, then Erdogan is not our friend. And that's going to be another wild card there in the Middle East. And Erdogan is not the only person that's got election fraud around him. Apparently, Marine Le Pen is facing a devastating defeat because a computer error, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, sent out multiple ballots to some French voters who appear overwhelmingly to be wanting to vote for somebody other than Marine Le Pen. Something like 500,000 of these extra ballots went on out, and there is no mechanism to check if people are voting more than one time with these extra ballots. But it's a computer blunder. Really, just an honest mistake. Just a glitch. Nothing suspicious here, you know, just because every single politician who seems opposed to globalism loses their election under suspicious circumstances, like Nigel Farage, the guy up in Norway. No reason to think that something crooked is going on here. Meanwhile, here in the United States of America, Judicial Watch has announced they've been doing a data survey of last year's election, and they're finding counties in 11 states that have more registered voters than actual eligible adult citizens. The evidence for massive election fraud last year is continuing to surface, all of it benefiting Hillary Clinton. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army has made the largest deployment of troops to Somalia since the Black Hawk Down incident. But they're all advisors. Nothing to worry about. They're just advisors. They're not going to be in real combat. And yes, I know, they said the same thing in Vietnam, and look how that ended up. John Rappaport has a very interesting article over in Rumor Mill News, Why Russia Has Become the #1 Target in the U.S. Press. And he's saying the same thing I've been saying all along. Russia is the biggest obstacle to the completion of the New World Order. China is number 2. And before they can have the New World Order, before they can have the one world government, they're going to have to smash Russia and China. Of course, they won't do it themselves. They're going to send your children to do it. And by the way, you know, we were talking about that draft bill that's sitting in Congress. And for a while it said they were going to draft women into combat roles, and then there was a huge hue and cry, and they said, all right, we'll take out the part about women being drafted into combat roles. That has now been put back in. At the first big bang, I guarantee you that is going to go to the floor of the Congress, and it will pass. Now, top U.S. official, Lieutenant General, McMaster, is over in Pakistan, and saying that Washington is going to take a tougher stance with Islamabad. So it's not enough that we're mired in all these swamps in Afghanistan and Iraq, in Syria and Libya and Yemen and all these other places, and Somalia too. Yeah, let's add another one onto the pile here. The more war, the better. Story out of Sputnik News. The world is being held hostage by American military madness, and that really is exactly what it is. Our military are drunk on the power of their weapons, and unfortunately it looks like Donald Trump is drunk on the power he has to launch those weapons. Looking at his reaction after that cruise missile strike into Syria, he's acting like a little boy who just found his father's gun. And it is madness. And I think the world is saying enough is enough is enough here. Over at counterpunch.org, they have a very good article. America must start looking how to end all the wars it has started. Because if you look at all the wars we've had over the last 16 years, the U.S. and its allies started them all. I dare anybody to point to a map of the United States of America and show where we have been attacked by any of these nations we're bombing right now. We're going to take a break here for commercials. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here now, along with Theresa May and all these other people out there. Russia is now basically warning the United States against any Syria-style actions in North Korea. And one thing we ought to keep in mind is the U.S. could go on into North Korea and use a nuclear weapon and then claim the resulting radiation proves they've hit North Korea's nuclear arsenal blah, 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 blah. Now, Donald Trump is out there justifying the strikes and the military buildup and saying, frankly, we have no choice. Yeah, we do have a choice, and we voted that choice, and Trump has betrayed the will of the people. The American people do not want war. The American people are sick and tired of war. We've been at war constantly for the last 16 years, and it has impoverished the nation, made us hated around the world, and it's all to make already rich bankers richer than they already are. All right, we're going to take some phone calls. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hi, Mike. Hey, I know you got callers that are still on the Trump train, but I just want to ask them, how much more are you going to give him? You know, I mean, when the missiles are going, when the mushroom clouds are, how much more is people going to take for people to realize it's over for us? He's been captured, sold out, whatever. He's not coming back to our side. That's what I'm trying to say. The wall's never going to be built if we make it that far. It's not going to fix anything, Mike. It's over. He's been captured.
Yeah, at this point, I think anybody who's still defending Donald Trump is either a public relations agent, propagandist, or they are that unfortunate, tragic class of human beings that can never admit that they were wrong. And I'm not part of that. I admit it. I was wrong to support Trump, except that I was supporting Trump primarily to keep Hillary out of the White House, because I think the mushroom clouds would have already bloomed by now had Hillary actually won. But in any event, you're correct. This is not the president. This is the system as a whole. If you look how much money the U.S. government spends on the machinery of war, it is a warrior nation, and it always has been. And unfortunately, they solve their problems, their self-created problems, with a war. Every time they get the economy into a hopelessly tangled mess, they get into a world war to get out of it. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008. And here we are on the actual brink.
What people don't realize, this country has become militaristic. I know people just can't accept that. It's militaristic and it's decadent, and just like Rome, and then people need to come to Jesus moment. Hey, Mike, I gotta ask you this: what happens if North Korea unloads on South Korea and Japan? The economy will crash around the world, pretty much, right?
Pretty much. Pretty much. There you
go.
The only way the U.S. can get into North Korea and not cause a ton of collateral damage is to literally go in there with nukes and absolutely flatten the place. And believe it or not, during the first Korean War, which technically never really ended, and the U.S. did not win that one, I think it was General Douglas MacArthur was urging the use of nuclear weapons on North Korea. And again, if you look at the history of that Korean War, the North Koreans took an incredible amount of punishment and never surrendered. And anybody who thinks that North Korea is going to be a pushover, they're dreaming. It's going to be another Vietnam.
They have a real army. I just want to let people know. I mean, they're not messing around. North Korea is a tough bunch of something like the likes of modern America hasn't seen in a long time, and be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, what are we going to invade these countries with? All these liberal snowflakes coming out of the college, who need safe spaces and Play-Doh and everything?
Hey, Mike, MacArthur never realized if he would have used nukes, wouldn't all the radiation head into the South of Korea?
Yeah, and Japan. And if they use nukes now, the current wind patterns are the radioactivity will go over South Korea, Japan, and unfortunately here as well, and we're already dealing with Fukushima. All right, we got to let you go,
yeah,
Dustin.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, we'll be right back with another phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Hey, Mike. One thing, as far as the draft goes, are they really that stupid? I talk to a lot of young people, and they're a lot more informed. We're talking millennials and Generation Z. And also, I get most of my news on the internet and look at the comments and everything like that. most of these young people are not into the mainstream news. They don't get their news from fake news networks.
Yeah.
They get it from the internet. They get it from a lot more truthful people like you even. And I'm telling you, they start a draft. They think the riots during the Vietnam War were bad. This could take down the whole U.S. government if they dared to do this. Not only that, 18-year-olds vote now. Did not vote during the Vietnam War. And that could change the whole, if we continue to have votes, that could really change things also.
Voting doesn't seem to change anything. I mean, we voted for Donald Trump to stop this rush toward World War III, and we're still getting it. In fact, I'm looking at this article I just put up at the website. This is out of Macedonia Online saying, has Trump lost control of the Pentagon? And they go on down how the Pentagon has basically refused Donald Trump's lead, and they're coming back with ultimatums and threats. And again, this dovetails with the information that I was getting, saying that Trump has been told by the deep state, the war is going on regardless of anything you do, and all you can decide is if you're going to remain as president or not. Because if you don't go along with the war agenda, you will not be president much longer. And, you know, it is very alarming to see the military-industrial complex apparently usurping the president's authority to make war. Are you there? Mark? I think we lost Mark. Okay, can we switch over to James in Arizona? James in Arizona, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how's it going? I wanted to talk about Korea, and I think your last caller was saying how people think that Korea is going to be a pushover and everything. I think Korea could be our, like, Operation Barbarossa / Stalingrad type moment. Because he's right. Everybody on these comment sections are saying, you know, Korea is easy, it's a pushover, they have no morale. You know what I mean? Like the same thing that people were saying about Iraq before we got in there. And then your last caller, maybe he's right. If they do bring in the draft, it's over. It is over. Because you see that PSYOPs in Berkeley, you know, what are those protesters? Do they really want, not just Trump protesters, but the ones who are on Trump's side, do they really want a war? Do they really want to fight each other as Americans, and then whoever American is left are going to be sent off to the war to die anyways? Like, do they really want to fight their countrymen? You know, they really need to look at this. You know, the rockets going off in Syria, which cost tens of millions, and then this one bomb in Afghanistan, which cost tens of millions. That money could be used on us.
The Moab is $16 million.
Over $15 million.
Yeah.
Just not like that. And then they get mad. They get mad when we ask for free health care, or when we ask for, you know, Meals on Wheels, or for you know, they get mad at us and saying we're the ones who are asking for too much.
I just want to see the American people be getting, you know, decent meals here. I mean, if we have a single American anywhere in this country sleeping in an alley and eating out of a trash dumpster, this government has no business spending our money on weapons of war or handing it to foreign governments. That's my opinion right now. The government has failed the American people. It's involved in all the rest of the world politics, and it's ignoring and neglecting the American people who basically are the walking wallet for all of this.
Exactly, Mike. You're right. And I'm going to leave you with one last comment. I was in Iraq in 2007, and trying to go down a road that's filled with IEDs is really going to mess up your mindset. It's really going to mess up your mental state. You know, if you do that on a daily basis. And these kids who are in college and they've never seen that, even the 18, 20-year-olds, let's not send them over there, okay? Let's not send them to deal with that type of stuff, because you can't fix a broken mind. You can't fix it.
No, you can't. Yeah. And again, going all the way back to The Art of War by Sun Tzu, right in the front of the book, he lists the things that a ruler must have to prevail in war, one of which is a military that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight fiercely and, if necessary, die in that war. And you must have a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will bear the hardships war brings even to the victorious side. And our government has neither one of those. The civilian population knows these wars are not morally right or just, and we're sick and tired of the hardships we've had to suffer under for the last 16 years.
Exactly, Mike. Well, thank you, Mike. I love what you're doing. You're doing a very good job. May God bless you. May you have a good day, and may you have a good rest of the week, okay?
All right, thank you very much for that. Getting on back to the news here. Apparently, Israel is now flying airplanes over Gaza farm fields, dropping herbicides. In other words, they're poisoning the crops, and they've done it 4 times so far this year. And apparently, so far, 840 acres of crops were destroyed. Now, if that isn't a war crime, I don't know what is. But that's what Israel is doing. They're destroying the food supply inside Gaza. So that means we're going to get all this stuff about anti-Semitism all over the media and, oh, Hitler, Nazis, and all the rest of that, followed by a bottle rocket fired out of Gaza into an empty field in Israel, followed by yet another major bombing of Gaza. Now, getting into the world of politics, corruptions, and cover-up, apparently Lois Lerner has asked the judge hearing the class action lawsuit against her filed by all these organizations that were targeted by the Internal Revenue Service. She wants the court records sealed because she's afraid that, she's being put into emotional distress by the fact that Americans are very angry with her. And she wants a safe space and she wants the records sealed. No, I'm afraid that doesn't work that way, because when you were over there working at the IRS, what you were doing is a public event, and we, the public, have a right to know what you were doing, and more importantly, why you were doing it. And so at this point, it seems like she's not even worried about whether she's going to win or lose the class action lawsuit. She just doesn't want it getting out to the public. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people have been talking about Jared Kushner. Somebody wrote in saying that Kushner is sort of Trump's Rasputin, which I think is insulting to Rasputin. But apparently, California Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu, in an interview on MSNBC, said Kushner's security clearance ought to be revoked because he continues to refuse to disclose his numerous contacts with foreign officials. And Kushner appears to be, one of the prime, if not the prime cheerleader for more war on these countries in the Middle East. And Lerner isn't the only person who's out there trying to rig the court system for her. Apparently, Britain's Attorney General has intervened to try and block Tony Blair being brought into court over the Iraq War. And it's a private case brought by General Abdul Wahid Shanan Ribat, former Chief of Staff of the Iraq Army, and basically saying Tony Blair has to be prosecuted for the crime of aggression because the attack on Iraq was based on a lie that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. And the Attorney General of Great Britain is out there saying, well, we don't need to talk about that. It's okay to lie to start wars. I mean, look, everybody's doing it these days. They're all doing it, Mommy, lying to start wars. That makes it okay. All right, let's take some more phone calls. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mike. I think that, this whole thing is just, Trump's out of the entertainment industry, and this is entertainment. There isn't going to be a shot fired. Korea's got an army, and it is ferocious. I mean, I talked to people from Korea. They can walk through a forest without making noise. This is just, and as far as them having nuclear weapons, I mean, I question that. I mean, during World War II, we couldn't even make our missiles fly straight, let alone the Koreans and the Chinese. I don't know how they're doing it.
We still can't. But, remember that embarrassment with the Tomahawk? Great Britain was test firing a Tomahawk, and it went the complete wrong direction, headed for the U.S.
Yeah. But and
in this
nobody's going to start a war with North Korea. It's not going to happen.
I beg to disagree. Okay. The people who want the war, they don't think in those terms. They just start out saying, America's never lost a war, and we're just going to go on in it. And even with all the recent failures and quagmires and stalemates, they're still out there thinking, war is the only option, because they've gone down this agenda of dragging the world back to Bretton Woods too far. They can't turn around. If anybody got up and said, these wars are a bad idea, let's call them on off, the U.S. economy would implode in 15 seconds flat.
Yeah, well, I can see Korea going over the DMZ, but I just don't see our soldiers charging up the hill. And that ain't going to happen. They're going to drop their guns and run like the Iraqis did. They're not going to take on these people. It might be a push-button war, but what is that? You got to take the territory. So who's going to take the territory?
You're absolutely right about that. That was the lesson of Vietnam. You cannot win a war from the air.
That's why I don't think there's going to be a war.
No, there's going to be a lot of bombs dropping and cruise missiles, and there's going to be a lot of radioactivity. And of course, what we're hearing is they're not planning to just invade North Korea. They're planning a decapitation strike against Kim Jong-un and his leadership directly. And that is a very dangerous precedent to set, because it justifies other countries doing decap strikes on our government. And even though I'm disappointed with Donald,
buy your auto parts soon.
And even though I'm
buy your auto parts soon for Hyundai, and they're going to take it.
Rick, may I please complete the thought?
Go ahead.
Even though I am disappointed in Donald Trump, and I see the administration taking us in a dangerous direction, I think a decapitation strike on our administration would trigger a nuclear exchange all over the world. And so it's a very reckless situation. You know something to keep in mind? Every time two countries go to war, both sides are convinced they're going to win it, and obviously half of them are wrong. And this time it may be our country that is in the wrong. It's certainly morally in the wrong and militarily in the wrong. And again, our Pentagon and our leadership may be victims of our own track record of success or their own overconfidence. There's a lot of hubris on display out there.
Okay, I'll give you 3-to-1 odds on $100 that there's not a shot fired within 6 months. Want to take that bet? Audience is a witness. 3-to-1 odds. I give you 300. You give me 100.
My gambling budget is only about 25 cents.
Yeah, well, it means you're not confident. You think I'm right.
No, I don't think you're right. I think you're absolutely wrong. And again, I don't even know if we're going to be here in 6 months' time. If this thing gets out of control, we're going to get hit here in Hawaii, and that's something that Claire and I are having to deal with. Yeah, Rick, thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I spent time in Korea. The last time I was there was 95, but I spent a tour in 95 there. I was a major, an infantry major. We estimated they had 2 or 3 nukes even then. That was under Clinton. But the thing is, we only have 1 division there. It's the 2nd, and the 2nd Infantry Division. Back at that time, we were pulling it back from the border. It used to be right up on the DMZ, because I think I alluded to you before, they have so much artillery. We wanted our guys to be out of reach of their artillery, because they could have been pulverized by them, and the casualties would have been sky high. So we pulled our guys out of range of even their long artillery, which, by the way, can reach Seoul. They can put about 1,000 tubes on Seoul. But at any rate, what they won't do, and this guy who was just there, they are ferocious. The terrain there is very hilly and very defensive oriented, friendly. But they got no mobility at all. They can't come out of their holes. So the first part of our war plan, by the way, which was back then, was 90 days before we can get enough. With 1 division, you can't advance. You rely on the South Koreans, who, by the way, are very capable. And mostly we were there to keep the South Koreans from attacking North Korea. Honestly, they're very capable, and they have an economy 3 or 4 times larger than everything else. Population is larger than North Korea's, but North Korea, their infantry leg, they can't come out of their hills. If they did, they'd be pulverized by air power. They can't maneuver at all.
You know,
so
what you're describing there is a country that is concerned with defense rather than offense. And that is the reason for North Korea or any other country to be developing nuclear weapons, to deter an invasion. There's nothing about North Korea's military buildup that suggests they're getting ready to invade anybody. As you say it yourself, they're building defensive fortifications, and they're basically protecting their border. Their concern was an invasion from the south, or obviously
right,
now
Mike.
from the United States.
And not only that, they don't have the motorization or the mechanization. They can't advance or anything like that. They have no air force whatsoever. They're locked in. Consider them, Mike, like the Japanese on Okinawa.
Yes.
You know, willing to fight to the death, dug in with, artillery and all that, but unable to maneuver whatsoever. But we could inflict a lot of casualties, but we couldn't advance on them anyways with one division. What we could do is do strikes. They have very highly capable, by the way, special forces are. They're tough as nails, the North Koreans. But what we could do is do helicopter insertions on a small scale all over, and they'd be hard pressed to do much about that. But they're locked into place, and they're really no threat.
Okay, but that was also the situation in Vietnam. North Vietnam did not have much of an air force until Russia started sending the MiG-23s. They didn't have the mechanization. They lived in the tunnels, and still they kicked us out because they're very, very tough people. And something you need to remember, when you're talking about invading another country, you are fighting people who are fighting to protect their homes and their loved ones right within eyesight against an invading army that is pretty much there for a paycheck. And that gives them a psychological advantage as well. Okay.
Well, what I'm saying, Mike, is we can't invade them. We cannot invade them.
No, I
understand.
It'll
take us 90 days to get troops over there.
All right. We got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the phones here, apparently a Black Hawk helicopter has suffered what the Army calls a hard landing at the Breton Bay Golf Course and Country Club in Maryland. Of course, looking at the photos, it wasn't a hard landing. It was a complete re-kit. And I'm waiting for the White House spokesslug to come on out and say, North Korea shot that down. The invasion is on. Putin did it. It's Putin with his shotgun shot down our Black Hawk helicopter. All right, back to the phones. Kathleen in Paris, bonjour. Aloha, what is on your mind?
Yeah, bonjour. Okay, I'm thinking about the fact that, like you're always saying, that how many times do we have to be lied to, and then, but you imply that it's this government. What if it's like government? It's the state or the statism that is not possible.
I'm sorry, I don't understand exactly what you just said, but it is certainly not just the United States government that is lying to its people, although they seem to be the world champions. If you go to my website, up in that top gray menu, there's an article of the liars, by the liars, and for the liars, which goes through history detailing some of the major whoppers that have been told to people by their rulers, like Ramses the Great, the Catholic Church, and so forth and so on. But my concern here is that right now we are in this swamp full of lies that is leading us to a new world war.
I'm talking about the idea of statism, of having a state. I guess what I'm thinking is maybe Ron Paul's libertarian freedom. Is there any way for everybody to be free? I mean, he talks, his Liberty Channel. I don't know how it would work, but
well,
how does libertarian? How is
it is possible?
Libertarianism.
Okay, let me get in here for a second because we're almost out of time. It is certainly possible to design a government that works for the nation and its people. It's been done many times in history, including back there in 1776. The problem is power attracts the very political power attracts the very sort of people who should not be allowed to have it. And each succeeding generation of new politicians tries to warp the system to benefit themselves at the expense of the nation and its people. And that is why eventually all nations will collapse, whether it's the Soviet Union or ancient Rome and soon to be the United States of America. This is not the nation that is described in that Constitution in the Bill of Rights. So it's possible to have a government that is taking care of the people in the nation. It's possible to have freedom as long as the people are vigilant against their politicians playing fast and loose with the rules. And that, by the way, is the very reason the Founding Fathers gave the American people that Second Amendment, to deal with misbehaving politicians. But unfortunately, through complacency with the American people, the corruptors of our society have gotten away with changing this country into something that's very ugly and was certainly not intended by the Founding Fathers. Primarily, that private central bank. Okay.
Yeah.
Kathleen, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back.